This is a story about a father who woke his children at 3 a.m. with a gentle lie, knowing that if they stayed until sunrise, they would never see another one. What happened in the weeks before that morning, and what his 7-year-old daughter accidentally said that started the clock ticking toward their execution, will stay with you long after you finish reading. Stay until the very end. This story will change how you pray tonight. Drop a comment right now and tell me where in the world you are watching from. Let us build a family across every nation and pray for one another without borders. This is a true story. No names will be used anywhere in this narration. This decision was made carefully, out of deep concern for the safety of the individuals involved and those still connected to them. The locations remain exactly as they were. Everything else is as real as it was the day it happened. I was born in Mogadishu, Somalia, in the dry season of 1974. I was a man of 30 years when everything I believed about God, about safety, and about my own family was turned completely upside down by a radio broadcast and a voice I was never supposed to hear. My wife was a nurse at Medina Public Hospital. I was a mathematics teacher at a secondary school in the city. We had 2 children, a girl of 7 and a boy of 5. We were a quiet family, respected, faithful. We attended every prayer, observed every expectation, and kept our heads down in a city where keeping your head down was the safest strategy available. Somalia in the spring of 2003 was not a place where questions were welcome. The kind of questions I am talking about were not political ones. They were deeper, the kind that rise up in a man at 2 a.m. when the city is quiet and he is alone with the honest parts of himself. Questions about whether the faith he had been handed at birth was one he would choose if given the choice. I was tuning my old radio one Friday evening when a broadcast from Kenya cut through the static. A man was speaking in a voice that carried no anger and no threat. He spoke about a God who did not demand fear. He described love as a foundation of faith rather than its substitute. He talked about forgiveness being available today, not deferred to a judgment none of us would live to appeal. I sat with those words for a long time after the signal faded. Something in my chest had shifted without my permission. I did not pray that night in the usual way. I whispered something different, something I had no template for. I told God that if Jesus was real, I needed him to show me. Over the following weeks, my wife and I began listening together. Every night after the children slept, we turned the volume down low and sat close to the speaker. She told me one morning, after returning from a night shift where she had held the hand of a dying man, that she had spent her whole life asking God to stop the suffering around her and had never felt heard. She revealed to me that hearing someone speak about a God who had already entered into suffering rather than standing outside it broke something open in her that she could not explain. We gave our lives to Jesus Christ on a Thursday night in April 2003, kneeling on the same prayer rug we had used since our wedding. We said no words out loud. We were terrified, but the peace that settled over that small room was unlike anything either of us had felt before. What followed was a life lived in 2 layers. The outer layer was everything Mogadishu expected of us. 5 daily prayers, Quran recitation, attendance at the mosque, correct answers to every question about our faith. The inner layer was something we guarded like a flame in a windstorm. We kept our Bible hidden inside a hollowed-out Quran. We memorized verses during walks near the airport where the noise and movement gave us cover. We created a code language for our faith. When we said the Kenyan professor had called, it meant we had listened to the broadcast. A new medicine meant we had prayed together. A headache meant stop everything immediately. The persecution did not begin with violence. It began with exhaustion. Living in 2 layers is a weight that accumulates slowly until it becomes unbearable. My wife told me she would recite one prayer on the outside while her heart was saying something completely different on the inside. She showed me one evening that the distance between who she was in public and who she was becoming in private was beginning to feel like it was tearing her apart. Then we made the decision that changed everything. We included our children. Our daughter was 7. Our son was 5. We understood the risk. Children do not have the survival instincts that adults develop through years of navigating dangerous environments. They speak from their hearts without calculating consequences. We knew this. We chose to include them anyway because a faith we have found felt too large and too alive to be kept from the people we loved most. We taught them simple prayers, short stories about Jesus adapted for young minds, quiet songs we sang in whispers with our hands over our mouths. Our daughter took to it with a seriousness that moved us. Our son treated it like a beautiful game, which in the most innocent sense it was. Then came the morning in September 2003 that ended our life in Mogadishu. Our daughter came home from Quranic school quieter than usual. We were eating dinner when she told us, in the matter-of-fact way that children deliver information that would make adults collapse, that her cousin had been standing near our backyard window the previous evening. Her cousin was the son of my older brother. My brother was deeply embedded in the religious and social structures of the neighborhood. He was the kind of man who understood that in Mogadishu, reputation was protection, and deviation from the expected path was not a private matter. It was a community matter. She told me that her cousin had asked her why her parents prayed differently. She revealed to me the words she had given him in response. She had told him that we said special prayers to Jesus because we had a family secret. My wife dropped the cup she was holding. The sound of it hitting the cement floor seemed to echo through the entire neighborhood. We looked at each other across the table over the heads of our children and understood in that single moment that we had hours, not days. I asked my daughter gently whether she had told anyone else. She told me she had mentioned it to a friend at school. One child tells another. Another tells a parent. A parent tells someone at the mosque. The path from that sentence to our deaths was not long in a city like Mogadishu. It was a path that had been traveled by others before us. We knew how it ended. My brother would not protect us. This is one of the cruelest things persecution does to a family. It turns the people who are supposed to love you into the people most likely to report you. Not out of hatred, but out of a theology that genuinely believes that turning in an apostate is an act of mercy toward the community. My brother believed what he had been taught, and what he had been taught had no room for what we had become. That night we did not sleep. We sat in the dark listening to every sound from the street, every engine, every footstep, every voice. We prayed in silence with our eyes open. At 3 a.m. we woke the children. I told them we were going to visit their grandmother in the countryside. My mother had been gone for 2 years. It was the only lie we told that night, and it was a necessary one. Our daughter looked at me with those clear eyes and accepted the answer completely. Our son asked for his toy and fell back asleep against my shoulder before we reached the door. We left with 2 bags, documents, a small amount of money, water, dry food, and the hollowed-out Quran that contained everything we believed. We left behind furniture, photographs, clothing, and the radio that had started everything. We left quietly through the back door and into the alley where our old motorcycle waited. The roads southwest of Mogadishu in the early hours of the morning are dark and uneven. We avoided the main routes because the checkpoints are operated by people who are already looking for reasons. I took paths I had known since childhood, trails through dry vegetation that scratched our legs and shook the motorcycle with every meter. We stopped twice when we saw vehicles in the distance, cutting the engine and sitting motionless in the darkness until they passed. Our daughter asked me, somewhere in the middle of that long, dark ride, why we were not taking the normal road. I told her we were taking a more interesting one. She accepted this and pressed her face against my back and was quiet. The heat became brutal as the sun rose. We stopped under a dried acacia tree and shared water and bread. My son pointed at a bird and laughed. I looked at my wife. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling at him. In that moment, in the middle of the most dangerous journey of our lives, surrounded by dust and fear and the real possibility that armed men were already behind us, that small laugh from a 5-year-old boy felt like the voice of God saying he had not looked away. The Kenyan border came into view in the late afternoon. The crossing was slow and formal and frightening in its own way. A uniformed officer looked at our documents and then at our faces for a long time before asking us whether we were seeking protection. The word came out of me like something I had been holding underwater for years. Yes, we were registered and processed and eventually transported to Dadaab, the large refugee settlement in northeastern Kenya. Nothing about Dadaab was comfortable. It was vast and dry and full of people carrying weights that showed in their faces. But it was the first place in years where I heard someone say the name of Jesus out loud without checking the door first. A small church made of clay and corrugated metal held services near the edge of the camp. Ethiopian refugees had started it. On the first Sunday we attended, my wife wept when the congregation sang together without lowering their voices. She told me afterward that she had not realized how heavy the whispering had been until she was finally allowed to stop. Our daughter sat beside me in that service and leaned up to my ear. She told me that this must be what heaven sounds like. I held her hand and did not answer because there were no words large enough for that moment. To every believer reading or watching this, I ask you to pray with real specificity for men and women living right now exactly as this family lived. Not in history books, but today, in cities where the name of Jesus is whispered behind locked doors, where children are taught codes instead of hymns, where faith is a secret that could cost a life. Your prayer reaches those places. It has always reached those places. If you are reading this and you have been carrying the weight of your own life and wondering if forgiveness is genuinely available to you, it is. Right now, wherever you are sitting, you can speak to the same God who found a teacher and a nurse in Mogadishu through a fading radio signal. Tell him you know you have fallen short. Tell him you believe Jesus paid the price for that. Ask him to come in. He will not turn you away. Share this story. Like this video. Subscribe so you never miss what comes next. And please, leave a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from. We are praying for you.